I want to actually get thoughts of all of you on an issue that hasn't really come up. There are many kind of big issues that have come up a lot, and one issue that hasn't come up very much. We're supposed to be thinking about the frontiers of machine learning and potentially the future of the subject. And I think it works naturally in a kind of academic and commercial kind of different applications or different aspects of the subject. How are we doing on the kind of skills issue on producing the next generation of machine learners and machine learning experts? And then it'd be interesting to hear a little bit about experiences and tensions for the people working in the academic context. How do you go these days trying to recruit good people when they get offered fantastic opportunities at Facebook and Uber and so on? And then for the people on the commercial side, how that works. So how are we doing? What should we be doing differently as a field, or what should we be thinking about differently if things aren't working well in terms of training the next? Training is an issue at lots of levels. There's issues about training people who'll just be users of machine learning, but in terms of the next generation of research leaders, how are we doing?
So I think there's definitely stress here. There's definitely stress here because the companies are really trying to hire up machine learning talent very aggressively. One thing that I personally am doing is teaching a class at Cornell Tech this semester.
So I think that I'm more coming from the academic side. I think there's a lot need to be done. I mean, at the undergraduate curriculum and training, I think, and also graduate student admission for statistics department, that's where I sit most of the time. I think we still emphasize the mathematical dimension too much. And that's really hurting us in the sense that it's not like it's not important, just one of the important skills. I think I put it together with computational, critical thinking, communication abilities. They all become a lot more important over the few decades. But the traditionally and the qualified exams all pushing, we're still admitting the same type of student from 20 years ago. And that needs to change. And also paper counting has to get better, or people need to read papers when people are being hired. It's become accounting. Somebody mentioned there's something called a automation bias. Maybe we all like to count papers, maybe we're biased, but that's also hurting people who kind of doing innovative and applied research. They don't have as many papers, and we don't have the human resource to referee all the papers either. So I think the paper counting game has to slow down at least.
And what about the competition? I mean, do you have a sense of the competition, probably at postdoc type level, particularly based where you are, with people who could go and work for Facebook or Google or?
Yeah, I lost my two best, overall best, one of the best students to industry. And because a lot of exciting things going on, and also because the way in my group we work, we write good and slow papers. They're just not winning in the paper counting game. And that's really a big loss. For them, they have great time in industry. There's not a loss. But for academia, we really have skilled reproduction of teachers right now.
So what I've been doing is at the undergraduate level, I have a lot of undergraduates that come to me, and I get them to take a lot of the structured programming courses in electrical engineering, which they're not required to take, but I pressure them to do this. So that's one thing I've done, because a lot of these guys are going to go straight to industry, but it's fine, it's fine. Or if they want to go into academics, they'll be stronger candidates. And at the graduate school level, we have been slowly but surely against a lot of resistance because people like math, want a lot of math, including more and more computational type courses at the first year of grad school. I think it's good.
Yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction. We have to keep pushing it, though. It's very trendy to talk about STEM majors and pushing people to go in that direction. But we're just gonna have to keep encouraging that from the very youngest people all the way up the chain, that you need to focus on these things. And even if that's not going to be your core job or your ultimate major or whatever, you need that skill set anyway. And I think we just have to keep hammering that message home.
Okay, but I do think that there are a lot of smart there are a lot of smart social science students who can be, I think Karis mentioned that yesterday, they can also be brought in. Mm-hmm. And also our mathematical STEM trained student could also do a bit more liberal arts. But that takes time. I mean, usually you need 6 years with the computing skills. Yeah. So that's the tension.
From my perspective, with an academic hat on... I'm not sure your mic's on. That's it. There we go. With an academic hat on, I think one of the issues I see is people coming from the domain-specific side. So it's great having generations of quantitative students sort of coming through who are very excited about using their talents elsewhere. But many of the problems I'm interested in require really deep biomedical or clinical expertise. So it's very hard for those people to then sort of get into a field where you also need the really strong domain knowledge around the machine learning, the computer science. I think one of the things that happens is that the only way they can succeed is by coming into sort of interdisciplinary research environments where there are other people who bring those skills, but then that has the sort of knock-on impact that Ben was talking about, that you end up producing fewer papers, you end up having an awful lot of authors on papers in which it's a bit harder to see what the different people bring. You know if you know the people, but it's hard if you don't know them at all. So I think there's this big issue of attribution and recognition, and working out what is a meaningful and successful contribution in these what have to be inevitably interdisciplinary collaborative projects.
Thanks. Let me open the discussion up to anyone.
I had a similarly general, sort of like it's the last panel kind of question that something that hasn't come up at all is cybersecurity. So when you're deploying all these sorts of things, are you worrying about the fact that someone could hack in, or that the data that you're promising is going to be in one place might wind up somewhere else, or that some baby monitor or something is just leaking stuff out of your lab?
I can. Yeah. So in my world, everything has to be HIPAA compliant. So of course. So that means everything has to be encoded. Of course, there's always still the chance, right, that things can be broken, the codes can be broken. But HIPAA compliance, that's a pretty, I mean, I have to be very careful even about the cloud services that I use.
Certainly Uber's been worried about that with self-driving cars from the beginning. I mean, you may have heard about the guys who hacked into Jeeps, right? So we hired them immediately. And that's, it's been a very core part of what we're setting up, because that is an issue. Yeah.
So for the decision service, the publicly available one, it deploys into your account. And so it's your control over the data, and it's whatever you choose to impose.
Okay, there's been a reoccurring theme that I just wanted to highlight, which is that for many of the algorithmic applications that you all are talking about, and we've talked about for 2 days now, there are societal implications, and we've gone back and forth about what that could mean, and I agree it's vague and difficult. But I just want to encourage everybody to think about building it into the algorithm. So, for example, on automobiles, self-driving automobiles, if we're worried about urban sprawl, the car slows down after it goes 10 miles. I mean, it's kind of silly, but it would certainly deter individuals like you who wanted to commute a long distance. And then the same thing with the media. If we're concerned about our bubbles, then we want to build in to the algorithm itself some other way of proceeding. And I think that's true of all the applications. And maybe it's a sort of incentive for the technical people to think long and hard, getting input from social scientists and policymakers, what some of the societal issues are. And when that becomes more clear, to make that part of the algorithm, or at least give the user the option of using that algorithmic correction to what otherwise would be an optimal solution. So I guess that's a statement more than a question. But
So I agree. I think these things are very important in the long term. And I don't fully understand how to do this yet, but I do want to understand.
Oh, I don't think anybody really understands except in a few very specific cases. We're talking about the future. This is a decades-long process in which there's going to be interaction between the social and policy side and the folks writing those algorithms.
I think there are some spaces where that could be addressed early. So population health or sort of interventions is an area where machine learning perhaps hasn't had much of an impact so far. And that's an area where you could imagine, if you're interested in disease, by the time someone's hit a disease state, you're kind of too late. So you want to bring stuff up early. And so the more that one can do to identify early interventions at the population level, for which there are already really strong existing frameworks for how you do that, and national structures that enable population scale interventions, then that's an area that I could potentially see a lot of interest in.
So something like herd immunity would be an ideal case
exactly.
where you build that into your algorithm. Yeah.
Okay. Richard, you said you had a comment, but I've got a question for you about the comment. So suppose machine learners, as I think many of us would be happy to build these into the algorithms. Who tells them what the optimization, how to change the optimization function and what the new one is? So who decides that? And then in a situation where, even if there were some kind of body politic or something that said, okay, we have decreed this, if it's not forced on them, then one company may include that in their algorithm, and then like cars slowing down, and because that's for social good, and then someone else doesn't. And then we have the tension between an individual who will probably go for the cars that don't slow down because they get home quicker, and what society wants. How do we think about or juggle those kinds of issues?
Well, of course I have no answer, but I would introduce the R word, regulation. We have that same problem in a lot of other settings, and I mentioned before the possibility of an analogy to the FDA, which would not only review internally various algorithms and how they perform, but you could imagine them promulgating regulations on these sort of issues that presumably if they're regulations, for example, like worker safety that OSHA promulgates, you'd have to enforce. But we need some expertise that I don't have from political scientists and lawyers about how you might do such a thing.
Yeah, and regulations much easier to think about and I think to implement where it's safety that's at stake. Regulation for a social good is A, tough, and B, potentially scary.
Well, it depends. I'm not sure. I mean, I think on its face, what you're saying makes perfect sense, but I haven't really thought about it. I suspect that there are public goods that would be as easy to quantify that people would feel, like herd immunity, that might be easier to work with, but off the top of my head, I can't make the case.
Can I chime in? So I would like, as a user, like recommendation, I would like to have the choice. Like I like to see some random news or something. Just get me out of my comfort zone. I mean, I would like to press a button today. I want to see something very different. Other days, I'm just going to take whatever you feed me. And I think that giving the user some choice would be really helpful. I mean, I'm kind of bored now, all the recommendation books, Amazon, they kind of figure me out. Now they give me sometimes even Chinese, right? It's just like, it's too much. I also feel like they know too much about me based on what I'm being fed. That also makes me kind of uneasy. Things like that. It's like, I want to be an anonymous user. I don't want to be like, you figure me out, and almost like I want another account or something.
So one thing that makes a lot of sense is websites which do this kind of thing should have some place you can go and just say, forget me.
Yeah.
Seems very doable. It's not hard technically.
That would be very nice.
Yeah, there should be a button like that. I have a question/comment along the same line. I think it maybe links to the first question. I guess we are all very specialized people. It takes a long time to be doing the things we do. And so by the time we get to build an actual useful machine learning system, we've been doing this since undergrads probably. And this idea has a cost, because I noticed that nearly every time a question is posed to us, we come up with a technical answer, or we attempt to find a technical answer. And this assumption is quite scary. Many interesting questions in this business will not be answered by technical innovation, but by something else. And this links to the first point: how do we train the students? And yes, we can add extra STEM and a little bit more of Python, and then we make them take a course in Java. But the truth is, there has to be something in their training that allows them to understand that many technical questions will not have technical answers. If we want to rank things or not, just the very notion that things can be ranked by one-dimensional quantity. What is the effect of the notion of ranking things? That doesn't have a technical answer. The idea that they create a website in which every single hotel or craftsman, gardener can choose to join or not. And if they join, they're ranked by my metric, and if they don't join, nobody will know they exist. That creates a cascade of problems which will not be solved by a better algorithm. So let us keep in mind, we are training those people who will do these things for the next 20 years. They should know there are other options. And we should know it too, by the way, because the discussion of let's put a limitation to the car so the car doesn't go too far, and then you are forced to do what the company says. Every single time we do that, we are reducing people's autonomy, which you do at your peril.
So I want to defend technical answers a little bit, because technical answers are the kind of thing where I feel like I can make a big difference. So for example, 6 months from now, I may have a better algorithm for dealing with fairness issues, which will become available in the decision service. And that's something which, I don't think technical answers solve all problems, but I think merely making an option available which helps make the world work better is a good thing. Right? It may not be that the world chooses to take that option up, but that's the thing that we have control over as technical people. And I think
that sentence is the very point. As technical people, we only see technical answers.
I'm not saying we only see technical answers. I'm saying that as technical people, technical solutions are the things that we can do better than almost anybody else.
Sorry, I missed the last thing.
As technical people, technical solutions are the things that we can do better than almost anyone else.
Of course. I mean, what else? I mean, it's a tautology. And the problem is that we all know when all you have is a hammer, then everything starts looking like a nail, right? So if you are a technical person, then you see technical solutions, and it is only natural, and it is not a criticism. But having different people in the room, having a way to be joined by people who are maybe with a different background might help us see other solutions. And I say this because a lot of times I see that we sit in a room, we have a problem, and we can only come up with a better algorithm, with a new constraint. And the question is always very loaded. How do you get society to formulate your constraint in that type of Prolog/Lisp, whatever? How do you incorporate it as a regularizer or as a new constraint in my program? Yeah, you can ask the question, how do you do it? But you're going to miss a lot of other issues, and some of them aren't going to be technical. And the point is, it goes down to training, goes down to teaching, goes down to education. I don't expect you to make a new algorithm to answer this question. It's part of how we decide to move the community.
So maybe what you're trying to be is not anti-technical, but more pro-diversity. Is that right?
I'm not anti-technical. I'm going back to England tomorrow, and I will have a group to run, and we are going to build our gigantic, Twitter mining algorithm, and we continue using Wowpal, Wabbit, and everything else. But I am aware that there will always be questions that cannot be solved by that. That's all.
So I'm certainly aware of that too. There's a number of problems in the world which do not appear amenable to a technical solution.
Bin, then Karen?
Yeah, if I understand now correct, like he's hoping that will produce more diverse type of people. Maybe we should hire anthropologists in your group, and your debate and her point of view, his point of view will help you to do your argument maybe a little differently. So I think that's what I understand taking away, which I very much agree with. It's just like we tend to have coalescence of the same type of people. It's just human nature, and it's easier and until everything breaks down. So that's what I see, I take, and I think your point is well taken.
And I think maybe Nello was arguing that we should be putting, it's good to bring those people into our groups, but also maybe putting some of that into our standard training of students, I think was one of the... I said it's good to bring people with different backgrounds into our groups so we can benefit from that, but there's also the possibility of students on the current track having a more diverse training for them so they get some sense of these ideas.
Take a class with a lawyer or something, for example.
Yeah.
Just see how they talk, right?
It's not necessarily that bad. Just
No, I meant to be positive.
I just wanted to address this issue of having a tendency to look for technical solutions if you're a technical person. And I completely endorse what was said here. And one of the nice illustrations that I like to refer to is a Carnegie Mellon study where they did a simulation of job ads that were shown to men and women. I don't know whether you're familiar with this study, but they did 1,000 simulated users, 500 women, 500 men. They had them surf the web for potential job ads, and then for potential jobs, and then they wanted to see what was served up to them in recruitment ads and ads that they might be interested in. And they found in this study that high-paying jobs were shown to men 6 times more often than they were shown to women on the basis, the assumption being that women are not interested in high-paying jobs. So let's think about that as a problem. We could think, okay, we could come up with a technical solution to this. We could try and find a way to serve up more high-paying job ads to women that is more reflective of their distribution in the population. So that would be one solution. Would it solve the problem of gender discrimination? I don't think so. I think we have a systemic social problem for which we need to think more creatively and more pervasively about social solutions to social problems. So I'm not saying that the technical solution is something we shouldn't think about, but there is a danger in seeing the problem, framing the problem quite narrowly and not actually seeing the underlying social dynamics and institutional drivers that underpin a problem. And so as a social scientist, of course I'm going to say that, but I really do think it's important, particularly as we move to an increasingly data-driven world. There is this sense in which we can just let the data speak and we'll find the solution. And that doesn't absolve us from thinking, doing the tough thinking about the kind of world that we want to live in, about systemic social structures and our need to address them and to think about whether we need to reshape them in forms that will build the kind of world that we want to live in. So I'm not saying the technical solutions are bad, but we need to get beyond them and think about when are they most suitable for solving the nature of the problem, to think about the problem around a sense, I guess. That's what I would say about that.
So do you think that a technical solution is a roadblock to a more holistic solution?
It might be in some situations, in others it might not. I think the challenge is to identify when.
So I guess I regard a technical solution, like trying to address the fairness of ads or whatever. I would think of that as actually a part of a holistic solution to a holistic problem.
Yeah, I can see why it would certainly be an improvement if you showed women the high-paying ads more often, but it's not going to solve the problem of gender inequality. So I guess that's what I'm saying, that we need to, I don't think it's going to solve the problem anyway.
I'll just follow up with a slightly different answer to the question you just asked. As somebody who's been doing, I was a programmer in the 80s. I've been in technology a long time. And but I work a lot with AI ethics now, and I have a social science degree as well as a technical degree. So I see a lot of people obfuscating when because there's a fear of math, there's a fear of technology, and there's a huge attraction of robots, which is the main thing I get stuck into. So I don't know if you know, this week there's just come out today, in fact, the final version of the European Parliament's recommendation to the European Commission about the new AI regulations that they're going to try to put together this year. And included in that was this thing about whether or not robots should be electronic persons. And there were people that were moving that, that robots are taking our jobs, so we should be able to tax them, and so they should collect money themselves, and then they should get the liability. Okay, for someone that I know, there's a lot of people. I get called humanist as an insult on the internet because I think that we should be human-centric. So I know there's a lot of people that, for sci-fi reasons or believing that it's perpetual life or something, really want AI to be to be legal persons. But I think that the motive of this was actually companies trying to limit their liability, basically making shell companies that didn't even have any people in them. So taking some of their automated processes and pushing it off. So this is why I get nervous when I hear things which are saying, oh, there's a technological reason why we can't do that. And quite often there isn't really. There are trade-offs, of course. But I've just seen so many times when people have used math or Arnold Schwarzenegger or something to intimidate people into not necessarily seeing the full range of abilities. And in particular, right now, there's a lot of people that are treating the government as an opponent. Okay, it's a little weird to say right now in DC, but they're treating the government as an opponent rather than as something, a way that society organizes itself and coordinates its decision making. I see government as an action selection device for a nation or a state. And so this oppositional model and this belief that regulation only constrains, and not recognizing that massive amounts of regulations have fed money into AI and benefited AI, just like people don't realize that they're benefiting from the government when they're driving on roads and nobody's invading them and stealing their crops, is a fundamental problem we have right now. So that's what I would see with what you're saying, basically.
Anyone have comments?
It's kind of a random observation that's not too directly, but I'm amused that we were complained to that technical people might propose a technical solution to the problem. And when you talked about robots becoming legal entities, all I could think is only a lawyer could propose the legal solution to that problem.
That's probably a good place to stop. So, before it gets too awkward. So I just want to wrap things up again with some thank yous. First of all, a special thank you to Michelle and her colleagues and to Jess and her colleagues for all the organisation they put in. So please join me in thanking them. Secondly, and related, thanks to Michelle and her colleagues for hosting us and for all of the work that they've done to make things work so smoothly. So thank you very much again. Thanks to the Sackler family for their generous support of the whole event. And finally, thanks to everyone here. The speakers have been fantastic, I think, throughout, and the level of audience participation has also been brilliant. So give yourselves a pat on the back. Thank you very much.